Hey guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, and today What's up guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, and it's the end of the year, so it's time to recap my favorite smartphones of the year. So there's been quite a few phones I reviewed this year. Some of them have been great, some of them not so much, and there's a few I can highly recommend to anybody who asks me what's my favorite smartphone. So this top 5 is going to be a list of phones that I personally consider the best out there, and I think you should consider them as well. But of course, they're not going to be perfect for everyone. So in my case, I prefer large, high-quality displays, large batteries for excellent battery life, excellent rear-facing cameras, great design and build quality, and features that really stand out, like a fast fingerprint sensor, waterproofing, stereo speakers, and a software experience that is smooth and provides useful features. So returning to my top 5 list, this year is the LG V20. The V10 was one of my favorites from last year, and the V20 brings many of those same features, including a large Quad HD display and the only swappable battery in the top 5 list. It's also one of the few to still offer a micro SD card slot, and among its many distinguishing features, it has a dual camera system along the back, with one camera specifically designed for wide-angle shots, a feature borrowed from the LG G5 and remains a unique feature in the world of smartphones. And although it's a little hard to reach on a phone of this size, we also get a secondary display that can be utilized by apps to display persistent information and tools. But my favorite use for this is for notifications, which means it no longer blocks your status bar or parts of your screen when they pop up. The primary camera also delivers some of the best 4K video recording with high bitrate recording and custom microphone settings. Audiophiles will also find the best audio experience among all the smartphones on my list thanks to the dedicated quad DAC and custom audio tuning. Ultimately, the V20 is a phone for enthusiasts who want tons of features and customization, a trait that is sort of disappearing from phones as the software experience is simplified. Yet it does all of this while maintaining excellent performance and battery life, and is perhaps the most feature-packed phone on the market. It's by no means the best looking or best built phone in my top 5, but with a rigid metal shell, it's still a premium design. Of course, it could use a better speaker or an OLED display instead of the IPS display, but overall it's a standout phone that gets the basics right and then some. OnePlus got an early start in 2016 with the OnePlus 3, but snuck into my top 5 list with a revised 3T. And although the price continues to creep up, it still remains the best value among flagship smartphones. Now, this phone did not make my top 5 list because it's a good value. It made my list because it's an outstanding phone regardless of the price. Despite costing half the price of many flagships, it sports the best specs among 2016 Android phones with 6 gigs of RAM and a Snapdragon 821, which gives it some of the best performance scores in the business today. It's also equipped with a very capable, if ordinary, 16 megapixel camera with 4K video recording. Although only 1080p, the large 5.5-inch display makes up for it thanks to a bright OLED panel with deep blacks and vivid colors. The 3T also picks up a massive 3400 mAh battery and excellent all-day battery life and houses it in a thin and lightweight metal design. But the distinguishing feature of the OnePlus 3T is dash charging, which is the fastest charging system on any smartphone today, and it does this without generating excessive heat in the phone's battery, which is common to most rapid charging solutions. Ultimately, my favorite aspect of the OnePlus 3T is that it's just simple. It gets all the core basics right with a fast fingerprint scanner, functional design, and a software experience that is simple with some useful features added. Now, my next 3 smartphones are essentially tied for first place. They all represent the best the industry has to offer with the least compromise and the most polished designs and features. So among these phones is the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge, easily one of the best looking Android phones of the year with a curved display and a glass and metal design that never fails to impress. It's also the phone with the best display of the year with a Quad HD Super AMOLED panel, which might be reason enough to buy the phone above all the others. Now, this super sharp display also puts Samsung on the leading edge of VR. The G7 Edge also has one of the best cameras I've used this year, with quick launch times, quick autofocusing, and nearly idiot-proof image capture. Battery life is adequate, but probably the weakest among my top 5. Samsung also packs their phones with software features which may or may not impress everybody, but longtime Samsung users have come to really appreciate and certainly adds to the flagship experience. Now, the G7 Edge is also the only water-resistant Android phone on my list, but unfortunately that comes with one of the worst sounding loudspeakers I've tested on any flagship phone this year. Although TouchWiz performance has continued to improve, and so has the design, performance speed still can't keep up with iOS or near stock Android. But ultimately, Samsung really knows how to make phones that excite and impress at a time when everything is starting to look the same. The Google Pixel XL is definitely my Android phone of choice, and it's the very first phone to be designed entirely by Google. Now, the true strength of this phone comes down to its software. The rest of the phone gets the job done, but no better than any of the other smartphones on this list. The design is functional and visually distinctive, but certainly not the best looking in 2016. The camera spec sheet is fairly lightweight, without features like optical image stabilization or a wide aperture, but images are outstanding nonetheless, with some of the best image processing I've seen on any smartphone this year, especially in low light. Battery life is superb, and the huge 5.5-inch Quad HD AMOLED display stacks up nicely against the Galaxy S7 Edge, although it could stand to be a little brighter. Along with the Galaxy S7 Edge, the Pixel XL is designed specifically for VR, and the high-resolution display and Daydream VR platform is well suited to this purpose. But just like the Nexus devices before it, the Pixel represents the most current state of art for Android and is continuously updated with the latest releases, a persistent issue that plagued other Android devices, and one of the reasons I prefer Pixel or Nexus devices in general. Although you won't find a ton of features, the software experience is always reliable and quick, and with the recent addition of Raise to Wake, really lack nothing I envy about other smartphones. And finally, in my top 5, we have the iPhone 7 Plus, which picks up a tweaked design and a new jet black finish that makes it my favorite design of the year. There's just nothing that can compare to that flawless, continuous, glassy surface that wraps the entire phone. It also picks up an all-new camera system on the back with a camera dedicated to optical zoom. Although it's not an essential feature and probably not the reason to buy it, it can be useful, and I think it's the best implementation of a dual camera system on a smartphone this year. The iPhone still has one of the best camera systems on any smartphone, with flawless and smooth autofocusing and perfectly stabilized 4K video recording, which makes it my favorite camera for handheld video. Now, my only complaint is that the camera is hard to launch quickly, which is a feature I miss from several of the Android phones on this list. The iPhone also picks up a wider aperture, which means low light performance is excellent, although phones like the Pixel XL tend to produce better colors. The 7 Plus also gets a new brighter 1080p IPS display with a wider color gamut, which is still brighter and wider than any of the AMOLED displays, while still producing very solid and deep blacks and excellent off-axis viewing performance. Now, perhaps the most surprising thing about the iPhone 7 Plus is that it's the only phone here with stereo speakers, and easily the best sounding phone I've reviewed this year. It's also the only phone besides the GS7 Edge to be water resistant, which makes the speaker performance here even more impressive. The 7 Plus also remains the most powerful smartphone on the market by a significant margin, and it definitely shows in the smooth performance of iOS 10 despite its increasing feature blow. It also manages to hang on to one of the best battery performances on my list despite having the smallest battery, most powerful CPU, and brightest display. No other phone can really match the quality of the materials on the iPhone, right down to the sapphire crystal on the fingerprint scanner, which tends to be glass or even plastic on the other phones in this list. Now, the iPhone 7 Plus is still larger and bulkier than most phones with a 5.5-inch screen, and it's still the only flagship phone at this price with a 1080p display instead of Quad HD, which means it's never going to be a great handset for VR. Now, there are a few other phones that are worth an honorable mention, including the HTC 10, so if I had a sixth spot, this would probably be there. Now, I didn't make my top 5 list just because it doesn't have a great camera, and it doesn't have a lot of features that really distinguish itself from the other flagships on the market today. But it's definitely a great phone overall, and it does have one of the best sounding speaker systems on the market. 2016 also brought us modularity for the first time, and we saw that with the LG G5 and I think more successfully with the Moto Z, but I don't think either phone are worth recommending based on modularity alone. Now, when it comes to budget to mid-range smartphones, the options can be overwhelming, especially since 2016 introduced a huge variety of them. But there is no question that the OnePlus 3T is my favorite mid-range phone, since it also made my top 5 list, and there's just no other phone at this price that can match it on specs and features. Now, for a budget phone under $300 or $200, the Moto G4 lineup once again stands out as my go-to recommendation for a phone that delivers the most bang for your buck with a large display, affordable storage options, and a near-stock Android experience. But if you want ultra-cheap smartphones, I reviewed the $50 Blue R1 HD from Amazon, which is a shockingly good smartphone at this price. The Nextbit Robin